As always, I think it's important to fact-check the candidates. What Donald Trump just said there about FEMA money being spent on undocumented immigrants is a completely falsehood. Okay, so now let's introduce our panel of guests to discuss this. Joining us from our Washington, D.C. rooftop, we have Joseph Glauber, Senior Research Fellow, Markets, Trade, and Institutions Division at the International Food Policy Research Institute. And we also have Hannah Safford. She is the Associate Director of Climate and Environment at the Federation of American Scientists. And I was just fact-checking Donald Trump there, but I think it's important for our international audience to understand just how intense and heated this discussion has gotten over climate change, because in North Carolina, the federal emergency management workers that were there to help people had to flee a county because an armed man was coming to shoot them, a heavily armed man. So, Hannah, let me ask you this. Can you explain what is going on to the rest of the world? Why are we so weird about this?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot on Americans' minds as they're going to the polls. They've got economy top of mind. And what I think voters are increasingly coming to realize is that economy and the climate, they really do go hand in hand. You know, we've seen Hurricanes Helene and Milton together cost $100 billion, and that's money that's coming out of communities, and that's money that's driving up, those are costs that are driving up home prices for Americans. And when you're trying to rebuild, there's a lot of misinformation going on, and it's hard to understand. Are these people coming to help us? Are these people coming and bringing in the government? But really, the government is coming and providing critical disaster relief to American communities, and that's something that's been really disguised by misinformation that's been rampant in American communities.
Joseph, you're a climate expert. When you hear Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says the government is controlling the weather, I mean, how did we get here?
Yeah, climate's been so polarizing over the last several years, and
but just here.
Just here in
yeah, I mean, a couple countries, no, but just in the U.S.
U.S. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that at least, you know, what I see among, you know, in the agricultural community, at least, is they have a long awareness of droughts and how they're impacted by extreme weather events. And I think that their feelings towards climate actually have changed a lot over the last 10, 20 years.
So let's get to what the candidate policies are going to be. Trump, and this is maybe my favorite quote, when he says climate change, water will just go up an inch over 400 years. You'll have more oceanfront property. I mean, if Trump wins, this is a very serious issue. President Joe Biden has invested the most money ever in preventing the climate catastrophe that is oncoming. How much can Donald Trump undo this, Hannah? Can he just get rid of it?
Sure. So we saw under the Trump administration, there was a rollback of more than 100 climate environmental policies. Those are aimed at protecting clean water, protecting clean air, and protecting Americans from the worst impacts of climate change. As we look ahead to the next administration, there's a lot of progress that's been made under the Biden administration, and the largest climate investment and clean energy package in the nation's history, in the history of the world. So a Trump administration couldn't come in and undo all of that progress, but there's a lot they could do to slow it down, to slow the pace of clean energy deployment, and to slow the actions that the government is taking to protect Americans from extreme weather like Hurricanes Helene and Milton.
Joseph, you said something to me which I didn't understand, so I want you to explain it to me and our audience. You said trade is a mitigating factor in combating climate change.
Yeah, and I'm talking more globally now. I mean, the fact is, you know, when countries have big production shortfalls, they need to get supplies, and that's where trade becomes very, very important to mitigate those impacts. I mean, with climate change, with production shifting into regionally and out of some regions into others, trade's going to become even more important. And that's why, you know, free markets actually are really important. And I think that when you're talking about presidential candidates who are talking about, you know, having essentially putting up large borders with tariffs and other sorts of things, that prevents the flow of agricultural goods. And that could really impact countries that need trade at the time, you know, they most need it, when they have production shortfalls.
And sorry to our audience if you heard that. It's really windy up here, so things are just randomly falling. So, Hannah, I wanted to ask you this. How the part of the Paris Climate Agreement was that the underdeveloped countries, the poorer countries, are disproportionately facing the impacts of climate change. The wealthier nations said, we're going to get a fund. we're going to help you prepare for climate change, at the same time trying to cause less of it. Are they? Is it working, or is it falling short?
Yeah, well, we are on a track in the United States to meet our commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement, but we're at a climate inflection point. It'd be very easy for us to fall off that track. At the same time, there's a lot of momentum behind clean energy technologies and technologies that are going to help boost the economy, not just in the United States, but around the world if we can drive down those costs. So what we're seeing at the same time is we're seeing investment directly in countries abroad through initiatives like President Biden's Prepare initiative through USAID. We're also seeing investments in the United States. And if we keep those investments going, that's going to be a rising tide that lifts all ships on climate and the economy. But we could fall off really quickly.
Well, and that takes me to Vice President Harris, Joseph. Is she done with climate change, or is she going to say, well, we already did the largest fund, or do you think she would push for even more?
Oh, I think they'll push for more. There's a lot of stuff going on at the Department of Agriculture, for example, where they are encouraging farmers to adopt more climate-friendly practices. They're just getting off the ground on that, and I think there's a lot of benefits that would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions or sequester carbon, or things that would be very, very good to help mitigate the impacts of climate change. And I think that will, the next 4 years, you'll see more of that in the Harris administration.
Interesting fact, of the biggest money that they sent to make new solar panels, those are in 8 of the 10 biggest projects, 8 run by Republicans. Hard to get rid of it if your team is benefiting. Thank you so much. That was a really important discussion, and I appreciate it. So with just 2 days of campaigning left, let's check out what both of the candidates are up to on Sunday. Kamala Harris is set to campaign in several cities throughout the battleground state of Michigan, while Donald Trump will hit 3 swing states on Sunday with rallies in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And Al Jazeera will have comprehensive special coverage on election night. Make sure to join us from 22 GMT on November the 5th. That's it from here in Washington, D.C. We'll hand it back to you, Sammy, and the rest of the team in Doha.